Hey everybody, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2021 Chevrolet Spark, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system. Now before we get too in depth about the braking system itself and talking about what it can do and how it works, I figured it'd be a good idea just to kind of touch base on all the components that we're going to need just to flat tow our Spark down the road. So you're going to have a total of 5 main components needed to flat tow your Spark down the road. The first one's going to be your base plate. That's going to provide us with a solid and reliable connection point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. The tow bar is going to be that second component. All right, and that's going to be the physical link that connects the front of your Spark to the back of your motorhome. Third main component is going to be safety cables, and these are there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. They're going to keep everything paired together. The fourth main component is going to be tow bar wiring, and what that's going to do is transfer the lighting signals from the back of your motorhome to the back of your Chevy, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main component is going to be a braking system, and what this is going to do is apply the brakes in your Spark whenever you apply the brakes in your motorhome, helping to bring you to a more complete and predictable stop. There are a couple more components that I would suggest picking up. It's just going to make your flat towing experience that much better. One of them is what's called a automatic battery disconnect. Since the Spark requires you to disconnect the battery whenever you're flat towing, that can be kind of troublesome, having to get your tools out and do that every time. With the automatic switch, all you're going to have to do is push a button. Makes it super easy and straightforward. The other one is a what's called a stoplight switch. Since the battery is disconnected, does not have power when you're flat towing, your factory brake light switch is not going to work properly, okay? And many different braking systems, the majority of the permanent style ones, need a signal from that. And if that's your case, using the stoplight switch is going to provide that signal to our braking systems, and everything's going to flow and work correctly. So now that we kind of refreshed ourselves on everything that we're going to need, let's check out the braking system. Now, when it comes to choosing a braking system, this is where things can kind of get a little overwhelming. You know, there's a lot of different choices available out there, and a lot of them are a little bit different from the next. So you want to make sure to get one that's going to, you know, cover all the bases and work good for your particular situation. One of the things I do like about the InvisiBrake is the fact that it's going to work with pretty much any motorhome. All right, whether you have air brakes or hydraulic brakes, if it's really large or a smaller motorhome, you're going to be able to use it. And that's not the case with every braking system. You know, a lot of the systems will specifically only work with particular motorhomes, whether it be air brakes or hydraulic brakes and so on. A lot of the portable type systems can be used with any motorhome, but the downside is if you don't want a portable system, you know, you're going to have to live with it. And that's not the case with the InvisiBrake. You know, this is a permanent, at least more permanent type braking system that you can leave in the car. It's going to be super easy to set up whenever you are ready to hook up. Really, nothing really involved with it at all, and it's going to get the job done. So I mentioned it's super easy to set up and use whenever you're ready to flat tow, and literally anyone can do this. All you're going to have to do is take the tether. So one end is going to be bare, other end just goes to your safety chain openings on your motorhome's hitch, and all you're going to have to do is simply just put it around your breakaway switch pin there. Something pretty nice about the setup is the fact that it uses an indicator light, which is this here on your motorhome's dash, and that way whenever we're flat towing our Chevy down the road and we hit the brakes and the brakes in the Chevy are applied, it's going to light up red. So just a real quick way to kind of keep an eye on things. You know, that's going to let us know that the brake pedal in our towed vehicle is being depressed and working properly. And there's also an alarm and incorporated with the indicator light, okay? And what that's going to do is, let's say for whatever reason, maybe the brake pedal's sticking or something like that on your towed vehicle. You clearly don't want that. You know, if you're not hitting the brakes in here, the brakes shouldn't be going in your towed vehicle. If something breaks or something happens and causes that to be the case, what's going to happen is that alarm is going to go off up here, and that's going to let you know, hey, something ain't right back there, need to pull over and get it sorted. So chances are pretty good you'll never hear it, but if something does happen, at least you know it's there, and it's going to help alert you of that. So whenever you use a braking system, it's going to make your flat towing experience that much better. It's going to help keep you really safe and things like that. And I say that because whenever you're going down the road and you hit the brake in the motorhome, your towed vehicle is going to apply the brakes as well. And so it's going to help keep everything nice and smooth, if that makes sense. You're not going to, your motorhome isn't going to be responsible completely for not only slowing itself down in your towed vehicle, with the Chevy and the brakes too, you kind of come together as a whole unit and stop a little more safely. So it's going to decrease the stopping distance. It's going to take you to come to a complete stop and just make everything a little more predictable and give you a little more confidence whenever you're going down the road. So at the end of the day, a braking system is something that you're definitely going to want. It's going to keep everyone safe and make your drive that much more relaxing. It's a vacation. You should enjoy yourself and not have to, struggle and be stressed out about, the drive to get to your destination. But with that being said, as far as getting this installed, not gonna lie, it is pretty involved. Good news is though, you only have to do it once. Nothing really super complicated, just a lot of wires, and it's a little time consuming, but as long as you stay focused, you should be able to get it done. Speaking of which, let's go ahead, pull into the garage and hook it up together now. To begin our installation, we're first going to want to mount up our operating unit. In our case, we did it over here on the driver's side. We scoot our seat all the way forward and mounted up our system right there on the floor. These cars aren't huge, so not really a ton of options, so this is kind of what we have to work with. The way I did it though, is simply on each side, just use some self-tapping screws, ran it down through the floorboard, and that keeps it nice and secure. Before you drill down there though, not a bad idea to check underneath, make sure there's nothing there. In our case, it was wide open, so chances are good that'll be your scenario, but never a bad idea to check. So now we can get all of our things plugged in. I did just loosen this up so I could kind of tilt it. We could see what's going on better. But what's nice about this setup, one of the things is that the wiring, the ends of it are going to have these connectors on them. So you more or less just plug them right into the back of your unit. Really can't mix them up or anything. You're going to have a thicker airline tube. Okay, so that airline tube is going to plug into this piece of hose. Hose is going to get plugged into the back of the unit. So it's just going to slide over the fitting. You're going to have a thin air hose as well. And again, that's just going to plug right into the unit. With that said, these are going to get routed up towards the front of the vehicle. And these are going to go kind of right underneath the seat and through a small opening here towards the front. So at this point, it'll be easier to go to the front seat, scoot our seat back. That way we can have a better look at what's going on. So with our front seat scooched all the way back, you can see where those wires kind of run up from our operating unit. And there's going to be a factory kind of slice in the carpet there. And we just pushed everything through there, okay? That way it'll kind of be under our floor covering and hidden, look really clean. With that said, when we push that under there, we are gonna need to lift our carpet up. That way we can get everything routed. So if we lift our carpet up, you kind of see where our bundle of wires and tubing comes through. This thin tube will simply just get connected to this cylinder. I don't have this mounted up or anything yet. Just kind of got it resting in place. We'll end up getting back to this here in a moment. But this just plugs right in. The rest of the wires and tubing runs along this factory wiring here. And up. All right, just have it loosely routed for now. Keep in mind, once we get everything together and working, that's when we come back, clean it up, and hide everything. It simply just runs behind our center console over to the passenger side of our vehicle. So over here on the passenger side, kind of underneath the glove box, that's where all our wires pass through the firewall. I did have to drill a hole in the firewall, that way we could get all the wires through. I cannot locate a factory grommet. Not really a big deal. Whenever you drill it out, just make sure that there's nothing of importance behind it. And once you have it drilled out, go ahead and feed your wires through into the engine compartment. So now in the engine compartment, this is where our bundle of wires and tubing comes up. And I just routed it kind of along through here. Our airline tubing is going to have to get connected to the vacuum system. So it branches off right here. All the other wires continue on, but let's kind of work our way through one at a time and get our vacuum system teed in. So in order to tee into our vacuum line, pretty simple. Down here we can disconnect it. Going to squeeze the two sides together. Alright, so you can see there's those little clips. You squeeze them, you can pull up on it, makes it easier to work with. And then we're going to have to cut our line. So I'll go somewhere in here. Be on the safe side, you want to kind of squeeze it, make sure you don't feel anything hard in there. Sometimes there's a factory valve or something there. But so what we'll do is get that cut. And then we can grab some of our fittings and our check valve and get that put in. So since this end is going to be closest to our engine, we need to use this check valve that has the black side on it. You want to put the check valve in to where it'll face the engine, if that makes sense. So set up like that. Then what we're going to do is actually probably just cut out another small portion here. So about like that. All right, this small portion is going to get connected like so. And then on the other side, you're going to take this T-fitting, push that in. And these are all barbed fittings, so they hold really well once you actually get it in the line. And this is just going to get hooked to our main line there. Now it looks like since we added this stuff in there, may be easier to cut a little bit out. That way we don't, have a ton of extra factory line taking up a bunch of space and kind of in there awkward. So let's get a plug in, just like we did the other ones. Let's get plugged back onto the factory fitting. From there, we have this one last fitting coming up here. We're going to take this included piece of tube, a few inches long. Once that's pushed on, you can cut your nylon air hose to length, and this is going to push into that small rubber hose. Want to get the plastic one in there a good bit. That way it's not going to come out. Usually about 3/4 of an inch or an inch will suffice to keep it from pulling out of the rubber hose. So now with the vacuum completed, we can continue on with our wiring. The next one that we're going to do is the red and black wire. That's going to get connected over here by our battery. So the black wire, kind of just loop that around back a little bit, connected a ring terminal to it, and that's going to go on the negative or ground side of our battery. Pretty straightforward. The red wire, it's going to get connected to battery power, so I just kind of ran it along through here. And this is going to get connected to a fuse holder. All right, so we're going to take the included fuse holder and strip back the ends of the insulation. those wires a good twist. When you're doing this too, you want to make sure that the fuse is not installed. We're going to do that at the very end. And so you have our vehicle side completely hooked up. One end of the fuse holder is going to receive this ring terminal. And get that crimp down on it. The other end is going to receive a butt connector. Just slides over. I'm using heat shrink butt connectors. These do not come included, just standard old ones do. I like the heat shrinks since the end's sealed, they give us a little more protection, but the standard ones will work just fine. But if you'd rather upgrade to these, you can grab them here at etrailer. Set that aside for now. What we'll do is grab our red wire again, get that stripped back, take our fuse holder, connect the two ends together, get that crimped down, and since this is heat shrink, we'll grab our heat source and seal up those ends. So with the heat shrink sealed up, can then hook it up to our positive battery terminal. I want to mention a lot of these vehicles will have a battery disconnect on them. Now if you're flat towing them, like ours does here, that's why these wires look a little different. If that's your case, you want to make sure to put it on the hot side of your battery. All right, that way if you disconnect the battery while you flat tow it, if you have this hooked up to the disconnected side, it's not going to have power. So you definitely want to go right off the terminal. So you can remove that nut using a 13mm socket. Pull it off. Slide the ring terminal on top of the stud. And then just tighten it back down. So moving right along, we can now hook up our white, brown, yellow, and green wire. So I just got that routed along through here. All right, and this is going to tap into our existing diode wiring, which is this here and there. Okay, so you cut that in half and strip back the ends of the insulation, and then you're going to strip back the ends from, you know, these wires coming from our main operating unit, and you're going to double them up on one side. So green to green, one end of the butt connector, yellow to yellow, brown to brown, white to white. So same deal. To complete the circuit, we're going to take the other end of your diode wiring, and those ends go color for color right into the back of that butt connector. One exception here is for the white wire. We're going to add maybe a foot or two extra length, put that in the back of the butt connector. So we'll have two coming off both ends of that. That extra wire is going to be a ground, and it turns out, if you follow it, where I hooked it up is right there. So if you follow that white wire down, here's where I grounded it out. Factory ground, perfect spot and place to do this. So I crimped on a ring terminal, removed that bolt using a 10mm, put the ring terminal through the bolt, and tighten everything back down. Now we are going to need to hook up a wire to the back of your 6-way connector. That way we can transfer the signal from the motorhome and our vehicle. That way the indicator lights will work. So what you're going to do is take the medium length of black wire. You're going to come to your 6-way, and on the S terminal you're going to want to put that wire in and tighten it down. The last wire that we have runs on down to the front of our vehicle. So it just kind of drops, you know, down through here, kind of underneath of our headlight assembly. So there's where it comes out. There was a little bit of extra slack, so I just kind of bundled it up right here. That's why it's kind of looped around like that. But with that said, it's going to drop straight down behind our bumper beam and then just run along the top of our base plate where we have it connected right here. So this gets connected to your breakaway switch. Pretty simple. You know, these just plug in together. And as far as mounting the breakaway switch, super simple as well. In our case, in many cases, the base plate's gonna have a bracket, and all you had to do was take a nut and a bolt and simply just bolt that breakaway switch right to the bracket. Now we can move back to our cylinder here and get this squared away. So pretty straightforward. The cylinder is going to come with a clamp, and all I've done is place that clamp around it, secured it to the floorboard, and that'll prevent it from kind of bouncing around and shifting on us. So the cable that comes off the cylinder, you don't want it to be pinched or in a bind or anything like that. So what I've done is just made a big sweeping loop, and that's perfectly acceptable. I ran it up to here and placed the anchor that keeps the cable from moving. I followed that up and placed our pulley system on the firewall. I just used the 4 provided self-tapping screws. Be careful when you're drilling, you want to make sure there's nothing behind there. And the cable comes off and gets connected to this bracket here that is on the brake pedal arm. So that just bolts on and the cable attaches through here. Now when you set the tension, you want to have, if you see this ball there at the end of that nut, you want to be able to kind of move that up and down a little bit. Like so. That's about spot on. And what you're looking for is whenever you depress the brake pedal, you want that cable to be as straight as possible, if that makes sense. That way it pulls it nice and clean and applies our brake pedal in a correct manner. And last but not least, if you remember, we had that black wire that we ran to our 6-way at the front of our vehicle for our monitor light in the motorhome. And this is going to need to get connected to the brake switch. Now we're using a Roadmaster brake switch, and that's because when we disconnect the battery power, our factory brake switch is no longer going to work. So we have these 2 wires coming off the brake switch. The black wire that we ran to the 6-way, you're just going to connect that to either one of them. One will get power, other one will be our signal there, and that's this wire here. With everything hooked up on our vehicle, all that's left is to take the fuse, place that into the holder, then we can go ahead and move over to our motorhome and get that set up. What we're going to have to do is mount up our indicator light somewhere on the dash where it can easily be seen. So here's where I mounted our indicator light. Pretty straightforward. You're just going to find a spot on the dash where there's nothing behind it, because you are going to have to, you know, drill a hole. You're going to open that hole up, put the sticker over the hole, and then simply just push that indicator light inside. Now right behind the dash here, there's a couple of wires that we need to hook up. So let's check those out now. So here's where our wires are hooked up. So you're going to have a red and a white wire from your indicator light, and then you're going to have the little speaker that comes with it too, the buzzer. That's also going to have a red and a white wire. You're going to connect the red wire from the speaker to the red wire to the light. Same goes for the white wires. The white wires are going to need to be grounded. In our case, in many cases with a lot of these late model motorhomes, there's going to be what's called like a brake controller plug under the dash, and you can use that wiring. So I simply connected those white wires to the ground wire on a brake controller plug, which happens to be the white wire. And then the red wire, that's going to have to allow a signal to be passed from our vehicle up here to the indicator light. So that blue wire is capable of doing that. So we simply tapped into that to get that done. Now, if your motorhome does not have a brake controller plug like this one here, You're just gonna have to refer to your instructions and run an individual wire from here to the back of your 7-way. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system on our 2021 Chevy Spark.